Hello my creative critters and welcome to Sketching with Sarah. I'm Sarah and today I'm taking a break from my week of Inktober videos and I thought I would share another October art challenge that I'm participating in this year, which is Drawtober. Since I've been breaking up my Inktober videos here by week, and since the last week of the month is technically a couple extra days from where we've been counting, from every Friday, if that makes sense, I decided to just wait until I do all of the drawings for Inktober and do a finale kind of video for the 2021 Inktober series. In the meantime, since I upload every Friday, I thought I would do a quick video sharing a drawing that I did for Drawtober. Drawtober is cool because you can use any medium that you want and you have 5 days to do it. And that's helpful because it's not a daily thing to stay on top of and you have a little more wiggle room. For this year's Drawtober, the theme is acts, like the acts of a circus show or something. And for Act 1, the prompt was send in the clowns. I know I didn't want to draw literal clowns, like human clowns with the makeup and all that. And if you know anything about me or the art that I create, it's gotta have an animal in it somehow. So I drew some clownfish emerging from their anemone. I used some watercolor pencil and a swatch sheet that I made of the same watercolor pencils to figure out what colors I wanted to use. And I chose some oranges for the clownfish, of course, but for the anemone, I decided to use a really warm and saturated pink color to make everything pop. Whenever I do this mixed media process, which I have a playlist of other things that I've done in this process as well if you'd like to check it out. When I work in this process, I like to start by sketching with the watercolor pencil in a color that I want to be like the unifying color for the piece. In this case, I want the orange to be bouncing around throughout the piece as kind of an undertone. So I used orange with some pink to sketch out the fish and the anemone fingers, I guess. I'm not really sure what those wormy things on an anemone is actually called. I think it's tentacles, but I'm not really sure, so correct me if I'm wrong, please. I'm always all for learning about animals. But anyway, during this stage, I'm really trying to study the reference and pay close attention to the shapes, as well as parts of the clownfish, for example, that is more in shadow or highlighted, and just really paying attention to how the forms and the light travels around the clownfish. I try to add as much pigment as I can at this stage because once I wash over it with my water brush pen, sometimes it's harder to get more pigment layers on top of that and re-wet it for the same effect. So with my experience, I figured using more pigment to start off with gives you more mileage as far as when you start to wash it down with the water brush pen. So once I lay down where I want the colors to go, I take my water brush pen to start and wash over areas that I want the pigment to be activated to get this overall soft look. I really try not to overwash it though because I want to keep some of the areas full of pigment to make it appear darker or at least more saturated in contrast, because you really can keep washing and washing until you're basically left with the same tone of blended color everywhere, and it's just really hard to find those defined shapes. And I am guilty of doing this probably even in this piece as well, but I really try not to because it just saves me time from, adding more and more pigment and washing more and back and forth. And if I'm careful the first time, I don't have to do as much back and forth, which for this one you'll see I do end up doing some of that. So after I soften all the watercolor pencil pigments, I go back for another round of watercolor pencil, and this time I'm specifically focusing on areas I want more contrast, like the black of the eyes, and start to create a more defined line around the white stripes of the clownfish, and just really starting to build up the form even more now that I have that base wash down where I want the colors to go. I'm using this step to really crisp up any lines that are too soft after washing over it with the water, and I'm using that watercolor pencil to add more clarity of what's the fish and what's the anemone, for example. After I add those strategic areas of contrast, I carefully add more waters, this time with a more fine-tipped water brush pen. It's a little bit smaller, so it's able to do a little bit more of a detail job, like a small detail paintbrush would. Adding more water on top of it really makes that pigment more permanent. And then after that dries completely, I go back to add the black details of the clownfish. I really try and do all of the black or any completely contrasting color last, just because when I'm doing the washing stage, I don't want any of that black to blend into any of that saturated color that I'm trying to keep. So I really make sure that all of the pigments is dried, and then I go in with the black watercolor pencil to do the details of the clownfish. If you try to add watercolor pencil onto a wet area, it'll result in this really fuzzy line when the pigment starts to flow out into the water, and that's just not what I'm going for specifically, so I just made sure that it was dry first. I'm also doing this drawing in my mixed media sketchbook, so it doesn't take too long for anything to dry really. So all of the supplies that I use in this video and any other of my videos will be linked in my description if you're curious to see exactly what I'm using, or if you want to try it out for yourself. So during this stage, I'm adding more crispy, clean lines around everything to make it more defined, and I start to add more pigment in the depths of the anemone, where more shadow may be, and basically just going back and forth, adding more pigments and more water to soften it, and back and forth until I was happy with how it looked. And then once all of that was dry, I started adding the line art around the clownfish and then strategically in the anemone to unify everything together. I really enjoyed working on this little drawing in my sketchbook. I mean, the color palette alone really makes me just so happy. It's just so bright and cheerful. And this was my take for the Drawtober 2021 Act 1 prompt. Send in the clowns. I hope you guys enjoyed watching what I came up with for this prompt. And if you did, don't forget to leave this video a like and subscribe for more arts and animal related content. I upload a new video here every Friday, and I would love to have you become a creative critter with me and follow along on my YouTube journey. If you want to see what I've been up to for Inktober and my other Drawtober drawings, follow me on Instagram to see them as I draw them. If you made it this far, leave me a comment and let me know if you're participating in any October art challenges. And if so, drop any of your Instagram handles or Twitter or whatever, because I'd love to check out what you guys have been working on. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. Stay creative, and I'll see you next Friday's video.